Welcome to The Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news of the day. And Comair, another casualty going into business rescue. And we've seen the impact of the lockdowns and, of course, COVID-19. Well, Southern Africa Towards Inclusive Economic Development, or SATIDE, have released an initial analysis on the impact of COVID-19 on the South African economy. It says if there is a quick recovery from the lockdown, the economy could contract by 5% by the end of this year. But there are much worse scenarios. SATIDE is a collaboration between local and international research institutes and the government of South Africa with the aim of having better data analysis and capacities. To discuss, we're now joined by one of the authors of that report, Professor Channing Arndt, who is a leader on the program as well. He joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. Thank you, Professor. Your analysis, I think, is based on the first 21 days of lockdown. So presumably it's already going to be worse than this because we're in another quite similar lockdown.
That's right. What our analysis did was to look at the full effect of locking down the economy. If you think of sort of GDP as a flow of goods and services, just like a flow of a river underneath a bridge, when you lock down the economy, you get a series of effects where you're shutting down businesses. Right. And in addition, once you shut down, for example, a manufacturer of ball bearings or something like that, you end up you're not buying steel bearings, and you're also not sending ball bearings to manufacturers down the line. So you have all sorts of knock-on effects which occur, and as a result, is this. Economic activity contracts more. What we get is about a 34% decline.
Well, explain to us the various scenarios. Your line isn't great, but let's see if it does get better. In one scenario, it's minus 5% or a contraction of the economy by 5%. Our Treasury talking about 16%. What could we see with a protracted lockdown if we go on for weeks, for months even?
Yeah, it'll be very difficult to go on for months. Like I was saying, you have this flow of goods and services, and that is slowed dramatically by about 1/3 as a consequence of the lockdown. When you release the lockdown, or as you release the lockdown, you're going to get economic activity to come back up. If the economy goes down, quite a bit, comes back quickly, then you'll have lost over the accumulate in 2020 about 5%. However, if you're locked down for a much longer time and you come back more slowly, that's where the 16% comes from.
And that's serious. So you not only look at production, you say that's come to a virtual standstill, but also the effect on supply chains and then the impact on household demand for goods and services. So that's things like tourism. It must be devastating and very hard to recover even after a lockdown.
Well, precisely. The longer the lockdown goes, the more you're going to start destroying capacity. And one of the key elements is to balance what you're doing to control the pandemic and the kind of impacts that you're going to have on the economy. The other thing that you're sort of trying to do is put the economy a bit in a state of suspended animation. You're hoping to keep things present such that once some control is established, you can bring economic activity back.
Well, you've talked about this balance. So many businesses have to shut down. The fact is, saving lives through these interventions like a lockdown can also lead to starvation, loss of life. Interventions to help people have to be reprioritized or deferred. If you look at it in that light, are the lockdowns worth it? Are they effective? Do you have an opinion?
I think what you wanted to do is you did want to communicate, at least to the public and to businesses, the seriousness of the pandemic. And introducing the lockdown is a good way to do that. It also was a manner of buying time to figure out, because in March we didn't know as much about what's happening even as we do today. It's the case that certainly for households, for example, who depend on labor income, and especially if you're don't have very high level of education. If you only have primary school, for example, then the impact on those hours worked and total wages earned is very high. If you don't have some other source of income, then yes, your food security is in jeopardy. You're just not able to buy the food that you need. In the case of South Africa, you have these fairly ambitious grant programs that are providing significant support to low-income households. It's not offsetting completely the impact of the lockdown, but it is offsetting it to a fairly high degree. So that's helpful. With that said, it's going to be very difficult to keep the lockdown in place for a very long time. A household that you sort of have the choice between staying inside and not being able to purchase enough food to eat, and going outside and trying to earn income in order to get food. Eventually you're going to choose to go outside and search for income. So it's not a strategy that without support to those households is going to last for a particularly long time. So eventually you're going to have to loosen these things up.
So Professor, that is the suggestion. Could this guide policymakers? I guess the idea is lift the lockdown as soon as possible.
That is what you want, and of course, what you do not want, you don't want a couple of things. The first thing that you don't want to do is to go through a whole lockdown, absorb these high costs, but then release too quickly and sort of too fast, such that you end up with the pandemic passing through 2/3 of the population in all cases. So in which case you've sort of gotten the worst of both worlds. What you want to push in the lockdown, control the spread of the disease to the degree that you can, and then loosen up such that you bring back a fair amount, as much economic activity as you can, but you're also slowing the progress of the pandemic. What South Africa will decide to do eventually in terms of how much it can slow down the pandemic is I think an open question, but that's not something that I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm an economist. We're looking at these economic impacts.
All right, so we can't give exact time frames, but yeah, ease the economic pain as soon as you can is the message out of that analysis. That was Professor Channing from Southern Africa Towards Inclusive Economic Development, or SA TIDE, that program.